This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. It's Alexa Linton here, and you're here on the Whole Horse Podcast, and we're here for episode 45 today. As you can tell, I'm a little bit sick, so hopefully I won't cough during the recording here, and I'm so excited today about my guest, someone I've been watching for a while and reading her amazing blog posts and just loving the way she's expressing herself in the horse world. So thank you for being here, Anna Blake. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alexa. It's fun to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Absolutely. As I say, I've been reading some of your work, and as a writer myself, very inspired by what you're sharing and the influence. How things are kind of getting out there with what you're sharing. And so first of all, thank you for what you're doing for horses.
It is my good pleasure. And so I will say to you as a writer, uh, I live on the Colorado prairie. I live in a place that's kind of conservative or maybe old school where training is concerned. And I just started blogging. I think writing is a really interesting process for learning. And what I can see in hindsight now is what a benefit it's given my training to also write. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. Yes, yes. As someone who processes through writing, which I'm sure you could kind of understand that sense of how much awareness comes through the writing.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like when I travel, um, it's like that really bad Jerry Maguire quote, my writing completes me. It's like it becomes real when I write about it. It's comfortable to have it with me. And it's just what you said. It's, learning is such a spherical thing. One of the things I'm starting to do is have writing workshops connected with calming signals clinics, the combination of the two. And partly because whether we're journaling or writing publicly, um, it's just such a great way to internalize our understanding.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to have to come to one of those. I hear you're coming closer to me this year, so maybe I'll have to make a trip. Because there's so much, yes, like this combination of skills, and I want to get into the calming signals because I'm sure there's some listeners that I've had some people talk about it on the podcast, but I'd love to get more into it. I think it's such an important piece for everybody to understand. And I also want to know how, what that combination looks like for you. So would you take a moment and just share with us sort of your understanding of calming signals and what that looks like with horses or with humans or just in general?
Um, yeah, I think I'll tell you how I got started with it.
Sure.
Um, I had a midlife crisis and within a month dumped my entire life in Denver and moved to a small, and I guess I'll call it affordable farm. And um, I got there and I was really lonely. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I got a herd of llamas and a couple more horses. And I noticed everybody having a conversation but me. And it was, I think a lot of people come to a deeper understanding of horses or animals in general, um, when we have no other option. It doesn't speak well of us, but it's certainly how it worked for me. And around that time, I was also, my horses were doing really well in the training I was doing with them, and um, you know, that whole side was going really well. I had a rescue dog, and someone suggested a book written by Turid Rugas, and she's a Norwegian dog trainer. And it's a thin book with lots of pictures. And I read the book and was, thinking about the dog I was working with. But the truth was that um, all of the things that they were talking about for dogs, I thought horses did too. And I kind of thought it was what I was doing out here on the prairie by myself. And so I wrote a blog about it. And the blog went viral, but more frightening to me, Tora Rugas emailed me and she said, I grew up on a horse farm. It's totally appropriate with horses. And it kind of set me on a path of writing about it more. What calming signals are is the language that horses speak, that all animals speak. But with horses, some of the calming, an example of the most common calming signal would be that you'd walk up to a horse to halter him, and perhaps he would look away. He's not refusing, he's not giving a flat out no, but what a calming signal is a message to us that we don't need to be so loud. They're trying to calm us. We don't need to be so loud. We don't need to be so quick. Most of all, that he's no threat to us. And if you just take a breath, of course, his head comes back. Um, we see common signals. Also, I'll just add this one more thing real quickly. Um, when you see a foal, they sometimes do this movement with their mouth called champing. And it's kind of a hollow opening and closing of the whole jaw. They show their teeth a little bit, and they
Mhm.
might do this when a gelding walks by, for instance. And it is that foal saying, I am no threat to you. You don't, you don't need to harm me. And then the gelding walks by. It's something that they do in the herd and with us. Um, I think learning their language is the biggest game changer in the horse training world within my lifetime. I'm so excited about it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I mean, I can see I was just reading your article this morning, um, your newest blog, and, in it, you sort of share this, like, "I'm just gonna keep learning, there's so much more to learn," you know? There's lots more to the blog, and I would definitely go and check it out, everybody. But it was that sense of, like, with horses, there's never a point where we're like, "Okay, I'm done. I got this."
No, if you think you're done with horses, get a new horse and see how it goes. Um, I think the biggest challenge we have is just that notion that there's always going to be a different horse. And, for me as a trainer, I just want to meet the most horses I possibly can, because it deepens the pool I have to learn from then. Um, and, for all of our different approaches to horsemanship over the years, one of the things I love about calming signals is now, at long last, we could actually ask the horse how the training is going rather than always listening to a sales pitch of what the training should be doing.
Mm, mhm.
Yeah,
Yes, and
it's not
so rather
flattering sometimes.
totally, rather than, and that must be quite a humbling thing as a trainer, to go, "Okay, like, I'm not like, this horse is the one that's, like, giving us the feedback here about, like, if what I'm doing is actually working for them."
It's humbling, but I gotta tell you, it makes my job really easy. Um, you know, partly because this is the method that I've used to train for so long, but partly because I don't actually have to sell it to people watching because the horses are very clear about it. Um, I think sometimes, especially for stoic horses, they have not been heard. And again, I mean, the body language they use has not been acknowledged. Um, I call it a conversation, but it's totally nonverbal. And there isn't anything mystical about it. Y- You know, it's brain science and the voice that comes from their body. And, you and I speak in that same language. We just get distracted because we have voices. And so, that you walk into a room, um, I think a lot of us are introverts. A lot of horse people are introverts. And so we walk into a crowded room and whatever is going on, we have a tendency to look down and away, or we'll, put a hand over our eyes if it's really bad and we don't want to look. We use a body language all the time too. Um, we get distracted by our words and thoughts from it, I think.
Yeah, so as humans, and I think we don't notice it very often, like, that we are doing calming signals all the time, that we are receiving them from the humans around us all the time as well. But yeah, whether or not we're actually aware that that's happening is another story.
Well, I think it's true with horses too. I think we're aware of the really negative ones. And so, if you and I were in the exact same room and, I'm a gray haired woman of a certain age, and let's say I walked up to you and stopped when my nose was about an inch from your nose. How is that?
Yeah, I think there would be some response in me for
Do
sure.
you think?
Just a little.
And, you and I are both laughing. Laughing is a calming signal for humans. Um, it's an exhale of breath, and, that's why horses like it when we laugh. It's a body language of ours. And, um, one of the things that I think is the most fun thing to do in clinics is have human demo horses as you just were, even though we're not in the same room. It's like, it's as undeniable in us as it is in them.
Absolutely, absolutely, and when you see that firsthand, and I'll often do that in my clinics is like, "How would this feel?" And people are like, "Oh," it's a real, like, settling into the response that's already innate within us that, so I can imagine with horses, it's that much more pronounced, that much more obvious.
I think with body spacing, especially, um, and, I am forever fascinated about not just the things about horses that are similar to us, but maybe even more importantly, the things about horses that are different from us. It's what's so fascinating about working with them.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about that. So in a horse, for all our horsey listeners out there, what are some of the very sort of, yeah, the calming signals that they might see if they're looking on a daily basis in our horses?
Um, for sake of easily identifying things, the first thing I'm going to say is you could be riding a horse or leading a horse, and maybe he'd drop his head down and rub his nose on his knee. And there was a point in time when most of us were taught that that was a horrible disrespect and disobedience.
I remember that time. Hmm.
Some people still live in that time. Well, he's just saying, I need a breath. I just need a moment. And Recently in a lesson, I was working with a client and I asked her to prepare to go to the trot, and her horse just slammed on the brakes and, threw his head down and rubbed his nose. Excuse me. Threw his head down and rubbed his nose, and, she just let him, and he lifted his head, and in an instant, his first stride was a trot. And, y you know, I think so many times, we interrupt their process without thinking. I think the most misunderstood calming signal, like by a mile, is that they call it non-nutritive chewing or eating when they're not hungry, they'll graze. And oh boy, we certainly have been trained to pull their heads up from that. And, depending on what they're doing, I'm gonna say I get a much better result by involving myself in that conversation, what the stress he's releasing is about, rather than, um I think in the past, what we've done is gotten into a habit of perpetual correction. And the reason grazing is, you know, hard and sad and ironically funny is it feels to us like the more we ask them to stop grazing, the harder they graze. We're having two separate conversations. The horse is saying, I'm stressed out. And this is a self soothing, calming signal that is also giving you the message that I'm no threat and you could go slower. Meanwhile, we think we're being, um, you know, disobeyed or ignored or some such thing, as if it was even possible for a prey animal to ignore a predator standing next to them. And so I think
Mm.
that's such a great example of how, horses are trying to tell us something and we're hearing something else. Um, Getting on the right side of that creates a really great partnership.
Wow. I'm just sitting here in this like, "Oh god, I've done that so many times."
You know, yeah, and, it's a famous quote, but no kidding, "When we know better, we do better." I mean, I think if any of us continue learning on horses, I don't know, maybe we need to see a therapist to deal with guilt, but
Oh, I do see a therapist to deal with guilt because it's just this like, wow, okay, I see yeah, I see it now, and I think, like, the nature of the human experience is, like, we don't see until we see, you know,
yeah,
and
and
then we're
then we
like,
can't unsee.
"Whoa, how did I miss that? How did I not see that?" Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and, I think when people start, becoming more aware of calming signals, uh, the initial pain of, "I cannot unsee this," um, y you know, I think it's really hard, and, here's the good news, and I like to combine calming signals with a little brain science because, I mean, right now, in a sense, you and I are kind of languishing in guilt, and, horses, it's not that they're particularly forgiving, they just don't even have that part of their brain. They have a huge amygdala, but they have a frontal lobe, but not like ours. And so, um, they're not particularly capable of respecting us or not. They're not
Yes, thanks
particular
for that. It's a really good one to just reiterate when I hear it so often, like, "My horse is disrespecting me," and it's like, that's not even a thing for them.
no.
Like, they can't comprehend that even what that means.
Yeah, that they
Mhm.
have some master plan to get your breeches dirty. Um, you know, we it's just not true.
Yeah.
Um, and and so we get into this situation a lot of times where, um, in my head, when I first started competing at dressage, I remember one time I had this just horrible ride, and my horse was running off with me, and I came out of the arena, and my trainer said to me, "Couldn't you tell?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but I was going through a list of what I might do about it." And, that's what we do. We live in this part of our brain where we think too much, and we need to go to that part of our brain that, is aware of the environment, because that's where the horse is. He's aware of the environment. And, I'm thinking my horse probably didn't feel much helped by me going through a laundry list of possibility in my brain as opposed to remembering to breathe.
Exactly, because for him, the laundry list probably just feels like you being tense.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like anxiety,
Yeah.
and it doesn't need to be differentiated, you know? It's not about he I don't think they think, she's afraid of the weather coming, or she seems to have a lot of anxiety about the trailer today. She seems to be afraid of the trailer today. She seems to be afraid of the table at the end of the arena. And, I think, they don't our anxiety doesn't need to be defined for them to feel it. It could be anxiety about getting to the grocery store on time for dinner.
Yeah.
Mm,
It could be anything.
yeah.
Mhm. And they're going, "It feels like this." Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
Wow.
anxiety. And I like to define anxiety. We have a tendency to judge anxiety as good or bad. It's bad to have anxiety because it scares your horse. It's good to have anxiety. It's the excitement about getting to meet your friends and ride. Um, Anxiety, as I define it, is being alive. And so that kind of takes away, hopefully, the guilt. um, you know, we are live in this world with horses, and we both have this same autonomic nervous system. They use it to, flight, fight, or freeze. And we do a human version of all those things too. And so we would do better to stay in that part of our brain, which is where they are in their minds. And, in that area, we can talk like crazy. We can communicate with calming signals and actually tell them that we are no threat. And, all of a sudden the gates fling wide.
Wow.
It's just that
Okay.
it's just that rat on a wheel mind that us humans have.
I know nothing about that.
Yeah, sure. Me neither. Well,
Oh my goodness.
and I have to say this because we both write. Um, I am a type A individual, and that's how it comes to pass that I have published books. And that's how it comes to pass that I get to do a lot of things in my life that I really enjoy. Being a type A person for me is great. It's just totally worthless with horses.
Oh my god. Thank you for naming that because, yeah, I am so with you. I have been an overachiever perfectionist. Like, I feel like I'm recovering from both
Yeah, in the
and
best
yeah,
sense.
in the best sense, and type A, and yeah, like, my horse looks at me like, "What are you doing?" She for her, in that relationship, all of that overachieving is like, "This is not how I wanna meet you today." You
Well, yeah,
know?
I mean, I think, I always say this, about horses. I was so ambitious as a type A person can be. And it was really easy to have the success I had. I simply had to change everything about myself. And, that's always it. It's always us.
Yeah, It really is, because if we think of our horses, if they were still out living peacefully and naturally and wild on the hills, it'd probably be, stressful at times, but fairly chill. But yeah, you add some humans into that, it changes things. And so there's curiosity in me because you alluded before to this idea of like that we as humans, by understanding how to work with calming signals, we can, it changes everything. So I can't help but ask, and I'm sure our listeners are very curious as well. Like what kind of things can we as a human being do to communicate through these calming signals in a more horsey way?
Now, this one is so easy, and it's something um, each of us knows to do and has been told to do 5 million times. It's just that once you understand why you should do it, it starts to seem more possible. We've all been told to breathe.
I was gonna
Um,
say, yeah.
yeah, just a few million. I certainly more than we've been told to put our heels down, and of the intentions. So an exhale of breath actually is the beginning. It cues our own autonomic nervous system. It has, the sympathetic part, that's the flight or fight part. And then it has the parasympathetic part, that's the restive part. I can cue myself to go back into the restive, restorative part, the parasympathetic, by breathing. That's it.
Mhm.
And when I do it, I cue my horse to do it. We both panic at the same time, me and a horse. Um, the difference between horses and us, and I keep saying this, that the differences are interesting. Their response time scientifically is 7 times quicker than ours. So that's the panic right there. That's how it happens. That's how the runaway happens. Um,
Mhm.
but if I can start breathing, they're going to come back 7 times quicker. And um, if you are standing there with the halter and the horse looks away from you, and you exhale audibly, not loud, not in a horrible exaggeration, just an exhale, he'll come back because that's a literal message to him that we are no threat. That's us giving him that calming signal. And so, I mean, there's a lot more that you can do, certainly, but there's nothing more important than that. There's nothing that'll bring a horse back sooner than that. Um, Horses, contrary to some, um, what else? I'll say junk science, herd dynamic theories. Horses aren't looking to fight, they're looking for peace. And if you can be that peaceful thing next to your horse, they will come to you every time. It's just that
Yeah.
we just have to, train ourselves because we panic as quickly as they do.
Yeah, and we don't always come down as quickly.
No, no. But,
Yeah.
we can get a little bit better and then a little bit
Yeah.
better.
And that's, having been someone that for my first 23 years was pretty much completely unaware that I had a body or feelings. Um
I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you.
Oh, yeah, I can feel it. I love dissociation. Well, I didn't, but, it was my coping mechanism of choice for, you know, humanness and such, and so, um and I've told this story many times, but I remember when I became an equine therapist, or I was becoming, it was literally my first month of school, and I had been taught to do some massage on the neck. And I remember going out to see these client horses, and they would not let me get anywhere near them. And I just remember being so devastated. It was just like, I've just started this 2-year program. Oh my God. it took me a long time to recognize that it was my own nervous system that was just absolutely off the rails. And it was such incredible feedback. I think it's really saved my butt in this lifetime to be an equine therapist, because there's no greater feedback from a horse that they feel good with you as to let you, touch them and work with them, and to let themselves open up to that. Um, so I think that really changed my relationship with horses so much at that point,
Yeah,
because I
you have
had
to
to
be
breathe.
polite.
You have to be polite. You can't just like rock in there and go, "We're doing this thing." I mean, it happens, but it doesn't really get you any of the results that you'd like in terms of the unwinding.
And I think for me, the most common thing I hear from people who come to riding clinics is, "I never really liked that approach, but I was told that
Mhm.
that was the only way to do it," or some version of that. And again, y y you know, if we come barreling into the room, slamming, kicking, screaming, rattling, who would wanna be with us? That I would give a person the same response that horses would give that person. Um, where do how did this ever start that we thought it was our job to go in and dominate everything, even with good intention?
I think that takes us very far back, Anna.
Yeah.
We might not have time to unpack
Yeah, that's a
all of
big one.
that today. That's a big one. Um, yes, yes, but I I think, it is in horses, with horses, so many of us have just done what we've been told to do. This is the way. This is the way with horses. Is this the way that horses are? And, um, the
And
requirement.
I think it's
Yeah.
human nature when it doesn't work to do it a little harder.
Oh, yeah, and keep pushing it. Yeah, yeah. And how do we go, "Oh, like, this hasn't worked, it's not working. Maybe there's a different option here."
So, um, you know, I think that these 2 schools of thought have been, um, alive and working since the beginning of time.
Mm.
And, I always remember it's my favorite dressage quote, and it's by Xenophon, and I'm gonna get it incomplete and wrong. But at 430 BC, he said, "What a horse does under compulsion lacks understanding, and beauty also, as if you were to whip or spur a dancer." I I you know,
Mm.
there have always been, I wanna say, not necessarily 2 battling sides, but, there have always been, people who have approached horses softer. I'm not sure how the I'm not sure how the dominating side got louder than the softer side, but I totally believe that's changing right now.
Yes, I really eh, I mean, here we are on this podcast probably preaching to the converted by majority, because, I think a lot of the listeners out there, they know my style, but, there might be some of you out there that are going, "I need a different way, like, what I've been doing hasn't been working." And I think as well, Anna, and I'd love your opinion on this. I think as well that the internet, the online presence has changed a lot for us, in that there isn't a sense of being so alone in thinking differently about things.
I I totally agree. I think that there are a lot of things you can complain about with social media, and, um, you can use it the way you want. You can create good with it. And for me, as I travel giving clinics, every place I go, um, there are a group of like-minded, predominantly women, sitting in a circle talking, and each person says they feel isolated, although they're in a group of people that they may not have previously known, but they've certainly met at the clinic. Um, and everybody agrees, and then the next clinic is the exact same way. I think that there are way more of us than we are aware, but we're introverts and we don't talk about it. And I think it is safer to share it on the computer than in public. But boy, you know, it's time to share it in public.
Oh, it sure is.
The horse world, we we are not the minority here. We aren't even the 51% majority. 95% of horses are owned by women. You know,
Yeah.
we can do this. There is no dissenting voice, of numbers.
Oh, no. I mean, yeah. I mean, I look at my clientele, and I'm sure you're the same. Like, they are all women, every one of them, and running events, like, it is rare that I will have a man there. Um, and not that I wouldn't want that. But yes, yeah, I think you're so right. And, I didn't want to get too, kind of on my soapbox earlier, but I think, the reason that particular, or a part of the reason that this particular dominance, kind of mindset has stayed around so long has been, dare I say it, patriarchal in nature. Um,
It's just the lens that it was first described in. And, someone else might have looked at that herd and said, um, it used to be we thought it was stallions protecting the herd.
mhm.
And then we looked a little closer and figured out that the mares weren't letting the stallions in because they were a little disruptive. And then we decided to put bad names on the mares, boss mare, alpha mare. Um, but, somebody else might have looked at that herd in the first place and said, it's that old mare in back. And I think she is leading through experience and safety.
Yeah.
And, it's just a shift in perspective. That's all. Um, but the one that takes off wins, you know, the one that's the loudest on social media now, but, certainly in training in the past. Um, you know, we ha- we should let horses decide because we can listen to them now. They will tell us now.
Yeah. And we have the tools to actually know what they're saying, right? And it's not like, you don't have to come to an animal communication course with me to figure it out.
Well, and
It's much simpler than that, right?
yeah, I think it is, and I think we have to. I think that I'm not quite sure how the dynamic started, particularly in this country, but it's not this way everywhere. There are other places in the world that it's not. Um, other, I think there are things. Here's something we haven't talked about, just to throw something out in left field. For the majority of videos that you have seen, what breed of horse do you made in the US? What breed of horse do you see most often?
In the US, ooh, I would almost have to say quarter horse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you were to compare that breed, just, don't go nuts over analyzing this. If you had to compare that breed with dog breeds, what dog is most like a quarter horse?
Ooh, the one that jumps to mind is kind of like a Labrador.
Absolutely. And yeah, and and So for some of us, for instance, who might have been riding maybe thoroughbreds or Arabians when all those videos about quarter horses came out, some of us looked at them and said, "Ooh, not with my horse. That would never I'm riding an Arabian mare, that will never work." Um, and other people looked at them and said, "I'm having trouble with my Arabian mare. I'm gonna make this work." And, eh, in the exact same way that not every approach, works with all breeds, not every approach works with all people, but the bottom line is, if you are picking a fight, you're so part of what I think the great, argument solver is here, uh, is science, and the reason I get so excited about science is that there we get to learn about how brains work. We get to understand that horses can't learn when they're afraid, and then the science backs up the calming signals, and it gives us, I wanna say, firmer footing to stand on when somebody says that we're ruining our horse in any of the myriad of ways that you can ruin a horse by not picking a fight in some people's minds.
Mhm, mhm. Give an inch, they'll take a mile.
Yep.
I've heard that one many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm, mhm. And I love that you're bringing up the science. I just talked with Emily Keeson the other day, and um, there's so much research coming out now, um, about how horses are in herd and horses are with humans and calming signals and trauma informed approaches and why they work, and you know how how mammals learn in general.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
learn under stress.
Well, no. And, it used to be, black versus white or male versus female or dominance versus whatever titles you wanted. You could debate them all day long. Um, I have come to love science because finally I want to say there is an opinion that is beyond partisan rhetoric on either side. It sounded
Yes.
political there for a minute, but I think in the horse training world, there's an aspect of that. We get hooked a lot of times with the first training we ever heard of.
Yeah, and it becomes, I mean, I don't know about you, but I started riding horses when I was, you know, well, as young as I possibly could, because I loved them so much. And I say loved in, like, quotation marks there, because I've been having this, like, epiphany lately about how so often it's almost like we need to fall in love all over again. Like, it's like with what we learned early on with horses. When I look back, I'm like, "That wasn't particularly loving of me to do those things." And, it sort of brings to mind, harkens this, like, "Oh, like, let's begin again," from those places where I was really conditioned as a child, as a young person, to be a very specific way with horses.
Well, and I
Uh,
think too, I'm 65, and what I can say is, um, I in my formative years, it wasn't inconceivable that you would show your quote unquote love by hitting something. Um, you know, I mean, I don't think love. So I guess the thing that I want to say, I'll start by saying I love horses. I am besotted by horses. I cannot look away from horses. Horses are my life. I also don't particularly think that horses love us. Sometimes I think our love for horses gets in the way. And here's an unpopular theory, but love hasn't been all that perfect why do we meaning who doesn't have a bad experience with love? Um, what if they have it better than we do? Instead of us mimicking asking them to mimic us, what if we maybe got a little deeper into what they were doing, and what if that was better? I don't know that that's better, it's just the thing I think about lately.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I share that sentiment of just being I love the word besotted, like, just absolutely in adoration of horses forever, and I think, you know, anyone out there could probably put up their hand with that as well,
Yeah,
and you're right, I have been in my fair share of relationships where I have been with horses and men, and other people, where, I've been in a learning curve, and where we are learning, literally learning what it looks like to connect and love. I don't think it's something we necessarily come into this life understanding in full.
no, no, regardless of what our varied childhoods are or our varied experiences are, um, I remember one time I wrote that we love horses like a bowling ball hits pins. I mean, w we're so loud in our love. And one of the things about calming signals that, it's like the good news, bad news about calming signals. Um, our love I think for most people who would be listening to either you or I, we're not prone to come out with whips and spurs and draw blood. We might love them too hard, though. Do you think that's possible?
I think it's possible. Yes. Yes. I having been with my mare for 16 years now, my longest relationship. uh, it, I do see that along the way. I'm glad that I loved her so hard, in many ways. I think that our our she was a horse that required me to show up really differently, and initially in our relationship, I say initially meaning like years, but, initially in our relationship, that call from her, that sort of calling out, uh, for me to, like, get a handle on myself, get a handle on my nervous system, like, sort myself out, was really challenging, and I guess I say that because I'm so glad that I loved her as sort of deeply and weirdly as I did, because I think, that love kinda kept us rolling along, until we found
Absolutely.
found some more solid ground, where we could communicate, because I just didn't know how. I just didn't know how, and it was finally meeting, my mare's name is Diva, which makes a lot of sense. I was finally meeting Diva where she was like, "Actually, like, how you've been doing stuff is not gonna fly with me. Like, I need this other way of existing with a human, or that it's just I'm not gonna wanna to be there." And so, yeah, the love question, it's such an interesting one.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think, the I wrote, about my grandfather horse, who was my longest relationship, and, the first couple of years, I got bucked off him constantly, and people you know the story, we all know the story, and sure, if I was not so besotted with him, anyone with any common sense would have gotten a horse that was not so much trouble or so dangerous or so contrary. If you had friends watching your mare early on, um, there was probably a hint of unreasonableness. that would be us loving horses bigger than we were afraid of them. Um, and I think mares in particular, they're intact. We should consider them stallions, not geldings. And, you know, her opinion will be heard.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. And like you say, like that love, it won over that fear. And I see that consistently with horsewomen. I mean, I think other people would look in and go, "They're nuts." Like, that they could get hurt like that, that they could, that things could happen to them in those ways. They would just keep coming back for more. Um,
And, and I mean, for a lot of us, and I'm going to make horrible generalizations about horsewomen now. Just, I'm going to do it. Most of us are introverts. Most of us are consider ourselves kind of fringe dwellers of one way or another. And um, frankly, my mom had a lot to say to me about how I might please people more than I did. And I certainly wasn't going to change for her. And I certainly wasn't going to change for a boyfriend or a job or something like that. The only thing in my life that I ever cared enough about to change for were horses. And, you know, horses didn't heal me, but horses were something I cared enough about that I would change from, a way of thinking that was pretty self serving to a way of working with horses. And then once I learned to work with horses, then I had to learn to work with people. But without that entry from horses, I don't think I would be as successful as I am working with people.
oh, I love that you just spoke that out. I really do. Yeah. I sort of joke that, and I say sort of because it's very true. And so it's not really a joke that, horses saved my life. And, um, I went through a very turbulent time during my healing process. And that healing process lasted a very long time. And I would hazard to guess that there's people out there that, feel the same way, and that horses were not the reason I healed, but the reason that it was like the light at the end of that tunnel. It was like the thing that kept me going. Um, yeah. So I just love that you spoke that into this space. And I'm sure there's lots of
S-
people that resonate with that sentiment.
So, Alexa, we talked about being type A. I have to tell you this. I actually went to couples therapy, literally. I mean, no joke,
Hmm.
because I needed to be better for my horse. Um, they are emotional, they have emotions of their very own. And as a trainer, I noticed putting my emotions on top of their emotions is not the most effective way of communicating. I need to listen to them over my own noise or instead of my own noise. And, maybe the thing about horses is that it puts us in a position where we're willing to make really good choices for ourselves that, um, again, who else would we make those choices for? I
Yeah.
think so many of us leave home without all the skills we need because we're just not mature, we're just not mature. And in those first few years, we can get ourselves, I got myself in a lot of trouble.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't get myself in external trouble, but definitely a lot of internal trouble. Yeah.
Well, and I don't even think that it's unnatural. I think it is the process of leaving home, the process of trying to balance whoever you were at home with whoever you are out in the world. And, for me, there was a while without horses, and boy, those were hard years.
Mhm, mhm. I recall those years. University. I remember being a resident advisor, I was like, "I'm gonna make a program where we go and ride horses." Like, I was determined. I
Take the
must
cure.
I must smell them. I must be around them. The withdrawal symptoms of, like, I need to smell a horse. I don't know if you experienced that.
To me, it was, I compare it, to PMS. I lived in a constant state of PMS, and then, I would break down and, like, rent a horse or do whatever I could do, and then I'd cry for a month afterwards, and then I'd go back to having PMS. Um, you know, uh, it's all I I think about this because, these days, what it takes to own a horse is a whole lot more for most of us,
Yeah.
um, than it was 20 years ago or 40 years ago, and, yeah, I'm not quite sure how little girls today find their way.
Yeah, well, I hope that we can help them along their way, because I know for myself, that horses came because I had a lot of privilege and was able to do that, I think it's yeah, for those little girls where that love is real, to help them find it and maybe help them find the trueness of that connection more quickly than we did.
Yeah, sometimes when I have talks like this with strangers, as you are not, but you were initially, I forget that other people are listening, and the so the part of the crowd that I think right now feels like there is something unsaid is the part of the crowd who are 50 or 60
Yep.
and have that dream all that while and are with their first horse now. And so many of my clients fall into this category. They feel like, um, they feel like they would do better if they had had horses when they were younger, like you and I did. And I'm going to say, yeah, maybe not. Um,
Yeah, I would agree, actually.
you
Oh,
know, maybe you missed out on some things, but that doesn't mean the horses feel like you did. and
no.
and I just love this notion, whether women put up horses during child rearing years or didn't have the opportunity until a certain point, and then could pick it up. Um, so many times those women feel like they have been left behind or are at a disadvantage. And I don't think so. I feel like, skipping some of the drama of dealing with dominating training approaches or having to deal with teen angst and horses
Oh
simultaneously.
god, yes.
um it's not the worst thing. I
It's
have to say, having fewer hormones is a real asset with horses.
oh my god, yes. I can't wait. I can't wait. Oh.
It's a party.
Well, Anna, we totally predicted it that we would, like, have too much to say and would have to, um, come back another time and, restart this beautiful conversation. I'm super moved by today. Like, I've just been sitting here with tears in my eyes. I really feel like, um, so much of what you've shared has resonated so deeply for me, and I hope that I'm sure it's the case for our listeners or some of our listeners. So really, really grateful for you coming on today and sharing.
It's been really fun, and we are all, it sounds trite to say it, but it is the biggest truth. We are so much more alike than we are different, all of us.
Oh, isn't that the truth? One last wisdom bomb. I love it. Um, and Anna, share with us how we get in touch with you, how we find your offerings.
Um, it's really easy to remember, annablake.com.
Super
And
easy.
yeah,
Hmm.
my blog is there, and I have an online group, and my clinic schedule is there. So if you know my name, you can find me.
Fantastic. AnnaBlake.com, everybody. Head there, check it out. There's a clinic schedule and her amazing blog, which will make you laugh. The latest blog, like, made me giggle this morning. So have a read. um, and thank you all for tuning in, spending your time. I hope wherever you are, you and your horses are well. And I look forward to connecting with you all soon. Thank you, Anna, for being here today.
Thank you.
Wanting to learn more from myself and some of my favorite podcast guests like Josh Nichols, Sarah Sloty, Hannah Weston, and Emily Keeson, you can join me and many of these amazing instructors for the Whole Horse Apprenticeship, which starts March the 15th, 2020, coming up here in about 2 months. This is one of my favorite programs. It's an 8-month online immersion program into equine wellness, rider wellness, and how to cultivate the partnership that you've always been wanting with your horses. I would love to see you there. It's a wonderful time, and there's a beautiful community of horse people just waiting for you. If you'd like to learn more, you can head to alexalinton.com/apprenticeship-2020. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to answer them for you. Okay, have a great day. Bye for now.